Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In this week's video, I'm going to be taking a look at EMEA and everything that has sort of changed within it. So this is going to be a little bit more of a chill video where I sort of just talk through like some week one pickems, some ideas, and more so the changes we've seen within EMEA, because considering like some teams didn't do that well, some teams did amazingly. The weird thing within EMEA is that a lot of the teams that did quite well are the ones to have actually made the change. So before we get into pickems, before we get into the choices I'm going to be making in terms of victories, I just want to go through the teams because I feel like we've already had some shifts. And luckily for me, at the very top of Group Alpha is one of the biggest shifts overall, and that is the fact that Trex is currently inactive, says he's going to be taking a break for, I think, at least this stage, which honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a team, especially a slightly lower down team, taking a punt, because I think even though it clearly hasn't worked in this team, fantastic individual. Like I think the stats will pretty much speak for themselves, especially if you elongate it away from the last couple of matches where they're up against some of the best teams in the world. They made it top 4. So to make a change definitely must have had some issues here and there. I still think this is going to be a top contender. I got to watch a little bit of Sivo. I think that's how it's pronounced. If it's not, apologies. As I was watching through some of VCL EMEA, which I cast a little bit of. And this was the standout game. Maybe this is a life game. I'm not going to say I've watched mass amounts of Sivo demos, but to go 57 and 22 on a breach is fucking ridiculous. Like, I don't think there's any other way to put it. Like, it's one of the most absurd performances I think I've ever seen. I think that team is probably going to struggle without a guy being able to put up numbers like that. But I think that's the element they're looking for. Someone of a more supportive nature. Like, I don't think Vitality need more firepower when you have the likes of a Durka Safe, less trio. Kicks as well is not exactly going to put up small numbers. So I think they're absolutely fine in that regard. But yeah, you look across the board in the French league, he's been doing pretty well. So I'd say decent pickup. Obviously, a lot of this will be down to if he gels well with the team, but I still don't think there's any doubt that after their performances are over in Bangkok, that this team is going to be a contender for the title. So I want to move on a little bit. Another team that's made a change is, of course, Apeks. Now, this one was a surprise. Like, this one, the leakers didn't get this one. I was a little bit shocked, but yeah, Governor coming in, not something I expected. I'm not surprised to see Apeks make a change. Like, unfortunately, I don't necessarily know if the hype was directly the problem, but their issue was firepower. Like, they were very low down on the scale of just being able to put up numbers versus teams. And I think even when you look at, like, Gentlemates who didn't do particularly well, like, these are two teams that are basically battling against relegation. Like, if they finish in that bottom 4, they are done. Like, that's it. It's over. So realistically, you have to be taking risks. You have to be making moves. And I think in this case, they needed to make a change. Whether Governor is the exact fix, I don't know. Do I think he brings more firepower? Yes. Yeah, I think you go back to some of the matches last year. But again, a lot of the time he was playing more of that duelist role. So I'm intrigued to see how they're actually going to make this one work. Like, because now it actually seems like they have the sort of opposite problem of what I was originally looking at. I was going, okay, they're going to make Fluorescent and Bachinex the sort of like double duelist, and that'll be crazy. But now they have 3 duelists. Now, I will say Governor has some flexibility within his agent pool. In fact, his agent pool goes very far down, so I don't think it'll be an issue for him to adapt, whether he goes on to Sentinel, or maybe they put Batu onto Sentinel. I think that could be quite a cool move as well. Like, the kid can aim. It just seems like if he has too many things to focus on, that can sometimes go a little bit of a miss. So I don't mind this move. Will it elevate them into like a top 8 scenario? I don't know. I think especially when you consider their group, probably not. Like, I think that their group is a very tough one, and I think if you look at every other team, they are still the weak link. I don't think they beat Vitality, Na'Vi, Giant X, Fnatic, or Heretics. Maybe they have a chance against Giant X, but I think even just on a firepower level, I think they're going to struggle. Obviously, for a lot of the rest of the teams in this group, there haven't been any changes. I think for Na'Vi, I don't think they really needed a change. Like, I think all in all, they looked all right. In fact, this isn't even the game I want to look at. You go back to the Fnatic game, this was a massive choke. Like, a massive, massive choke. Like, they should have won that match. So, I think giving this team a little bit more time is the right decision. I think that they, on paper, are not bad. I think you've still got, like, a solid IGL. I think Hero is definitely at, like, a level of someone who could be a superstar. I think for somebody who's still so young. Koala actually, like, he sort of hyped up his own operator, and then I watched his operator, and I was like, he's got a good operator. So I think that he is probably the more flexible piece of what they need, and with stuff like Waylay coming into the pool, I think that it's actually an agent that I think should fit him really well. It's basically free aggro, which I think is as good as it gets. So I'm happy they didn't make a change. For Giant X as well, I'll be honest, when looking at them coming in, I had decently high expectations. And then you actually consider the manner in which they got eliminated. They lost to Liquid, who I think we can all agree went on a probably an incredible run, especially for their standards. I don't know if that will happen again, but that's the team they basically got eliminated by. And then they lost to a BBL who were also having a pretty great run throughout the tournament. Beat KC, who I think many people had higher expectations for. So I don't think they're in an awful spot. Again, though, you look at their group, and I do think that they sit in that bottom 2 margin. So they're going to have to upset. Because that's the thing. 4 teams make it out. So I think it's probably between them and Na'Vi. I think in most people's minds for spot number 4. I think everybody else will have Vitality, Fnatic, and Heretics going through. So I think that realistically, that's probably where I sit as well in that regard. But I think that still prospects. I'm still a big fan of the likes of Cloud and Tombizz. I think Purple can put up numbers. And yeah, I was actually impressed with sort of the dynamic they built. I think that Westside was better than I expected as well. Like, I heard a lot of hype until you see them play at Tier 1. But yeah, I'm very excited for this group in general. Fnatic, obviously, we know that the roster itself hasn't changed, but the coaching staff has. Elmer Putty inactive. I guess technically they also brought in Doombros or Eric and let him go at the same time. So it's a bit of a weird one. But I'm happy to see Milan, obviously someone I know quite well, take over that head coach role. I think that he is someone who can make this work. It's obviously a big step up. Going from, I think that's something people underestimate, is going from assistant coach, where a lot of the time your focus is going to be on specific strats or specific jobs within the team, going to head coach, where at times you can even be a glorified babysitter, having to look after people, having to do things that you didn't expect would be within your job, and obviously building everything from the ground up. So I think that's something he's going to have to take on, and I want to see if he can do it. I hope he can. And also, they've stolen the assistant coach / analyst of BBL. So all the stuff that you saw BBL cooking up, maybe not all of the stuff, but a lot of it, I know from speaking to him, came from Scott. So I think that that's actually a much bigger pickup than people might actually realize. I think that this guy is very intelligent, and if given the space to do things with their playbook, I think he could be a huge piece of the puzzle. Obviously, the sad thing with Fnatic is that Leo still doesn't seem available. And yeah, I think now this roster having a little bit more time, I think maybe realizing that, again, like, switching things up is okay. I think they had that after their first match versus BBL, were willing to be a little bit more flexible, but then still got not blasted, but kind of blasted by Fut at times. So I want to see how they've leveled up since then. I think a coaching staff change can get them there, and we already know they have the players. And then for Heretics, obviously, I think expectations were that they should have made the first one. This game was a shock. Like, this was, I want to say, not their best, and their opponents playing at like a level we've not seen from them. But this match was a massive shock for me. So I'm gonna take it with a pinch of salt and say that I know that a lot of their players were sick going into the event. I don't think they played their best, and I want to see what they've got, because, you know, they're a fantastic team from last year. I still have very, very high expectations, and I still think they're going to be challenging for the lead of the group. For Group Omega, definitely not Group B. This one's a lot more interesting, because I feel like we sit in a lot of middle grounds. So I'm just going to do the same and start from the top. Liquid making it to Masters was a surprise. I think that anybody who had them on paper making it from the roster that they had I don't know what you saw in this team before they played, but I didn't see it. I thought that they could get like a top 6, but making it to that top 2 was pretty incredible. And to be honest, they could have even won the whole thing. They probably should have won the whole thing. Kiko obviously has been insane. Like, I think that his level throughout any of their victories has been unbelievable. And I think that Nats at Masters had glimpses of what we know. Like, there was a point where he was best player in the world. I think that we know that he still has that in his locker every once in a while. The interesting thing is that Kamek got removed. And I think that, again, when you look at from the outside in, you look at this team and you go, okay, they got to Masters. We didn't expect them to get to Masters. They beat Sentinels. They lost to EDG and G2, who both made it right to the top of that event. Hey, it's a good event, right? You did okay. You still have space to learn. And then you kick a player. There's clearly something else there. Like, either an issue that was there before they went or even before they qualified. But to make a change, especially for a relative unknown, at least in my mind, like I really can't say that I know much about Serial at all. And again, when you look at the past 90 days, his roles almost completely intertwine with that of Nats. So I can only assume that whatever pracs and whatever sort of test that they did went fantastically well. Maybe with him on another role, like you could see in his past, he played some initiator. So I don't think, like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, he can only play Sentinel. But yeah, it doesn't scream upgrade on paper. But as said, I think this is clearly a role swap based more on the team meshing together rather than he was a bad player. Because I don't think Kamek is a bad player whatsoever. We're obviously going to talk about him a little bit later on, but yeah, I want to see what series go. Because obviously, again, like, he's doing well within the Spanish League. It's not bad. Like, I think the Spanish League looks a lot better than it has at times, but I still didn't expect to see him go straight into a Team Liquid squad that has just made it to a Masters event. So, hey, I'm excited to see what he's got. I always have a soft spot for Baltic players as well, because that's where I started my career in commentary. So I'm excited to see what he's got, but my expectations aren't really there. Now, Movistar Koi, again, have made no changes, which, I'll be honest with you, for me is a shock. Like, I don't think they looked particularly good when it came to the kickoff event. I think that you're kind of looking at a team that you expect to be near the bottom. So I can only assume that, like, they believe they didn't show anywhere near the level they had. And again, I think that some of the ideas that they cooked up, like these double Sentinel comps, I liked them. I think that they're a bit more out of the box than some of the other teams, and I'm a fan of that. It's just, again, it seems like a bit of a firepower issue, because even, like, they played against this comp from Liquid, which I think was truly horrific. Like, I think they comp diffed themselves even when they were getting opening duels. So, like, a lot of the maps they won, I don't even value that highly either. So to change nothing really does mean they have to have a lot of faith. And obviously we'll talk about it in a bit. They're going into a match versus Fut as a first game, and then KC as a second. Okay, yeah, this is a rough run. I think that I don't have a lot of faith, I'll be honest. And yeah, I'm sure Gorilla will probably watch this video and be very upset with that. But apologies, bud. I don't believe. Now, this is a different story, because I think that we sit and watch KC. I think that the first couple of games were decent results. Like, obviously, Vitality went on to be a contender for the title at Masters Bangkok. So losing them in incredibly close fashion is not the worst thing in the world. Beating Na'Vi on your maps, being dominant, pretty decent. I think it was especially Aves. Aves was insane. Like, I'm just trying to think back. Like, kickoff feels like it was a lifetime ago, but yeah, I think that Aves just had, like, truly unbelievable performances. And for someone that a lot of the time when I have seen him play, it'll be on high ping or in tournaments that, like, I think we saw him at, like, the Red Bull Campus Clutch, where it's like, it's not the most prestigious event in the world. I didn't have, like, massively high expectations of him. I think everyone else, like, Elite, we know what we're getting. Sugetsu, we know what we're getting. So I don't actually think that's a bad showing. It's this match. I think this is the match that just made me think that this team may just play to the level of whatever opponent they're up against, because I think realistically on paper, everybody expected them to beat GX with the caliber of player they had, and they didn't. Like, even the maps they lost, I don't want to say they weren't close, because they definitely had some decent comebacks and streaks, but they were underwhelming. And now I have to ask the question of, okay, you've been given loads of time. This is Sadak and Eng working together. This has to be a turnaround for me. And if it's not, then I can only feel that going into stage 2, something will change. I don't know what it will be, but I think my expectations are that this is going to be better, and as a minimum, they should be within this top 4. Gentlemates is a very interesting one, because especially their own sort of storyline that we had built was that Robbie BK is like this guy who's going to lead this team to victory for 2 weeks. Like, it was just that one again. Like, individually, sure, I don't think he played well. Like, it was not fantastic. I think, like, in a lot of games, like, you'll see him very, very low on the board, and so maybe that was the sort of decision, or maybe they didn't really agree with the leadership. But it's a bit of an odd one, because you lose to Fnatic and Heretics. It's not the worst. You beat Apeks and Koi, kind of expected. Like, these are games where I go, like, I want to know where this team sits, and I can only really assume that maybe they were going to stick with Robbie BK, and then Kamek came available, and they went, okay, how this is definitely an upgrade in terms of, like, firepower. I think that he, in most cases, performed decently on an individual level. I think especially in matches that seem to go a bit better. I think he's a solid player. He's definitely going to, on fragging power on the initiator, I don't think there's any argument that he's going to do a better job. I think that, but it's the calling, because now it seems like they've, from my knowledge, they've sort of mini over to calling, something I don't know if he's going to be massively comfortable with, and someone who's also on the Sentinel role, which in a lot of cases, if you're not experienced as an IGL and you're playing Sentinel, a lot of it's going to come down to, like, especially on attack, like, his lurks. Like, is he setting himself up rather than setting the team up? So I'm a huge fan of Mini. I think he was insane in a lot of their victories. That's the other worry, is if it's not doing that, if it's not him playing around himself at times as the IGL, is he going to lose his individual ability? Because if he does, I think this team is screwed. Like, because in their wins, he was their best player. Well, either him or Click. So I don't know if this necessarily puts this team up. I think on firepower, yes. But because you've swapped the leader out and put someone into a role that I don't know if they're comfortable on, I'd say for me, they basically stay in the exact same spot they were in. BBL's an interesting one, because I think everybody, including myself, went in low on BBL. We're going into kickoff. I had them right near the bottom because they were playing with a stand-in, and they had players I had no idea about, like Levin. I didn't know if Sociable was going to do it at the top. I had faith in Profek. And obviously, again, they had Vac standing in. Now, unfortunately, it seems like things haven't gone well for Chiwa and his visa. So that's not ideal. But they've got Magnum. And I think that Magnum is... Honestly, I feel like Magnum may have been a little bit hard done by last year. Like, he was the IGL. I don't know if, again, I don't think his IGLing was bad. But again, I think you can definitely see the impact on his own individual ability throughout the season last year, where I think he had to make a lot of sacrifices. I think going into this, him back on the Sentinel, that's the role I've always enjoyed him most on. And I think, like, from memory, last year he was given the option to either Sentinel or IGL, because I don't think Casey wanted a Sentinel IGL. So he chose to IGL. And now I think he just gets to go back to being the guy that played Sentinel. And I think that's the role he's always been best on. So I think this is an upgrade. Especially with Vac, who I don't think had been, like, massively invested into the game until he was picked up by BBL 2 days before. So I think that him, like, Magnum, literally, his whole Twitter is just him complaining about rank. So I think he plays it all day long. They have also lost their analyst, though. I mentioned it with Scott. I think he was a huge piece of this puzzle. So I want to see if everything is already in place, ready for them to go. I think that Mark New and Powell as a combo is going to be decent. So I'm not massively worried, but it's, where do I sit them? Like, are they going to be elevated, or are they going to be in a similar spot? And I think potentially it's the latter. I want to see how far they can go with beating some of these teams, because they came incredibly close with Liquid. I think even had some, it was an okay performance versus Heretics. and then obviously beating Fnatic. Like, that was the big one. So in this group, I actually think they're contenders, which it maybe reflects the group more than anything else. But for me, the favorite is the team that we're going to get to last. I think that Fut losing to Liquid shocked me, and I think they lost to an informed Liquid who are on a run. I think the thing with Fut is they're always this sort of like up and down, inconsistent team at times, but when they're on form, they're on form. And I think that if you're going to ask me who's definitely going to win like a few matches, I think Fut's guaranteed. I think that Zeus had multiple aces in a single map. The guy is impressive. And then you have players like Yetterjay, who honestly I think has been getting better and better the more he plays in this team. I'm so impressed with his individual ability. So I have no worries, if I'm honest, that Fut are going to be a contender. So now that we've sort of gone through all of the teams, all of the roster changes, the only logical thing to do is go for my Pickems. And this is, again, where I think things... Some, I think, will be easier, and some... Well, I'm trying to look. Like, I think this game especially, and even this game, I think is going to be difficult to call. So I'm going to get the easy ones out the way. I think, like... I hate to be that guy, but I think Thursday this week, well, if I'm being honest, maybe I'd switch the no crowd day to that day, because I think that could be a bloodbath. I think that Fut versus Koi is honestly just a firepower diff. Like, I would need Koi to come in with perfect counter plans to whatever Fut is going to run, and I think what Fut is going to run sometimes depends on the day. And even if you do perfectly counterplay them, I just think that Zeus and Yetterjay are just going to blast heads. And I also think Apeks, not only if this was their team from the beginning of the year, I think they're still mismatched versus a very strong Heretic side. But they're up again. They've only just brought in a player. So I would be blown away if they managed to take that one. Now, I think the other games are a lot more interesting. I think that Vitality GX, I will still go Vitality's way. I think Sivo is a good addition. And I think that with Safe, Les, and Durka, I just don't see there being enough for them to take that one over the line. But I think it might be closer than people expect it to be. I still think GX have a very solid squad. I'm now trying to think which matchup is next easiest. I always struggle predicting between Fnatic and Na'Vi, purely off the basis that Na'Vi's form is genuinely complete RNG. It's like flipping 100 coins and then just seeing like, oh, okay, one more of them landed on heads. That means Na'Vi's going to win. Like, I think that they have a good roster, but their read on the meta can be completely random at times. And sometimes that's brilliant and sometimes that's insanity. In fact, most of the time it's both. And so predicting for them seems unlikely. And yet, it still feels like one of those bold picks that could go their way. Because again, if Na'Vi didn't slip, I think that they win it last time around. I'm going to go on Fnatic. I think just slightly. I think that's going to be an overtime game that lasts a long time. But I do think that, I think having the new coaching staff buff, I think that at the moment Happy's still working on his own. So I guess the input's mostly between him and Angel, but I'm gonna edge it slightly in that direction, because I do think at times Na'Vi players, when they come up against a team like Fnatic, seem to crumble under the pressure. Funnily enough, for me, I think the toughest game to predict is this one. I think the BBL have had so little time to work with bringing in Magnum, because I think that was quite a late call, and I do think going into new metas, Sadak a lot of the time is brilliant. I also think that Martine playing Waylay will be nasty, because I think anything that gives him an ability to be aggressive is going to work. And then this last game, I'm still going to go Liquid. I'm not sure about the pickup of Serial, but I'm just too nervous about the IGL problems here. I think that no matter what, either the calling may not be perfect, or Mini's going to lose some individual sort of prowess, and I think either of those means that they don't manage to come out on top of this game. I think that Nats has been in good form. I think that if there were like issues within this team, that's probably going to fix them. And Yeah, I think that realistically, I just don't have a lot of faith that Gentlemates kind of completely fix their leadership. So that I think that's going to be my pick'em. I'm hoping that I'll do this every week, so get on my back if I don't. But let me know what you think going into, obviously, the season. It's about to begin. I'm very excited for everything that's about to start. We've had a lot more roster moves than I was expecting, and I think we've got some absolute banger games that are coming in this week. So I think that, especially going down to the last couple of games of the week, I think on Friday we're going to have an absolute show. I think that, again, I think to be honest, these 4 games honestly could go any way. So if either of these go the other way, we've had an absolute banger of a week, but I think these ones are all going to be exciting. As said, let me know where you think I'm wrong, where you think that there's going to be an upset, or where you think that I just don't have the right read on all of these teams. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you again next time. Peace out. Bye.